Today we're going to take my $100 printer and turn it into a $175 printer. Now I've had my Creality Ender 3 for almost a year now, and it's an amazing machine. I can do lots of things with it. It allows me to unleash my creativity and it allows me to make Hot Wheels stuff for my kid. But there are some problems, and I want to talk about what I did to solve those problems for $75. Bed leveling and bed maintenance. So to correct these issues, I'm going to spend $75 on 3 different items that will upgrade the machine to make it a better overall printer and to solve my problems. The 3 updates are CR Touch Auto Bed Leveling Probe, glass build plate, and upgraded springs and wheels. I'll start up the upgrades with the easiest thing, which are the wheels and springs. The Ender ships with really weak springs that can bend and cause the bed not to remain level. To correct this, all I did was get a $10 upgrade kit that has flat springs, alloy wheel adjustments. The next step isn't necessary if you're going to not be upgrading the build bed, but since I'm doing that, I'm going to do all of this in one step. I'm going to begin by removing the magnetic build plate that the Ender ships with. To make this a little bit easier, I have to preheat the bed because it's going to loosen up the glue a little bit and makes it easier to peel off. That magnetic subsurface peels off the metal plate and makes it so much easier to move by preheating the surface. When it's fully removed, you should see the aluminum base and 4 screws. After that, I removed the front pair of wheels and then the springs and did the same in the back. All I have to do is spin these until they fall off of this bolt. It's not a problem. After this, I just lined the springs back up with the holes, put the bolt through them, screwed them down, and attached the wheels, starting with the front 2 and then adding the back 2 later on. And the final step is to go through and level the bed to the best of my ability, just making sure that the springs looked equally compressed all the way around since there's not a built surface yet to level off of. Now we're on to the second upgrade, which is the glass build plate. This is a $20 upgrade, and in all honesty, this thing should last for a long time. The regular build plates run about $8 a piece, so you have to get about 2 build plates worth to make it worth it. The install on this is super simple, especially since we already removed all of the other pieces from the last step. Essentially, all you do is place the glass build plate with the logo facing out, and then you're going to attach the little clips that it comes with directly to the sides, making sure that it's out of the way of the main pieces. If you're not going to be installing an auto leveling system, make sure you reset your Z-stop before turning the machine back on and trying to print. Also make sure you re-level the bed prior to trying to print. The last, most expensive, and by far the most frustrating upgrade I made to my machine is the CR Touch Auto Bed Leveling Probe thing. There's a lot of different versions of this out there. The BL Touch is one of them, but Creality makes this one. It's a first-party accessory, which is why I went with it. It also happens to be a little less expensive. And straight up, this is one of the most annoying things I've done with technology in a long time. Nothing is particularly hard. There's just a lot of steps that are not well documented, and you have to do everything kind of right or really do a lot of troubleshooting to get everything to work the way it should. The install here is simple. The CR Touch comes with 3 different brackets that, depending on your printer, all you have to do is find the right one and put it on there. Essentially, it's going to mount onto a bracket. Then you're going to plug in the cable, and you're going to take that whole assembly and mount it onto your gantry. In my case with the Ender, all I had to do was remove the fan shroud screws on the hot end and put it on there and put those screws back in place, and it was attached to my machine. Now we need to deal with the electric parts of this thing. That cable needs to go to the control box, and we have to open up the control box to do so. There's 1 screw on the top that needs to be removed and 3 on the bottom. There is 1 different size screw on the bottom, so the longer one goes all the way towards the back for reassembly. My printer had the 4.2.2 version of the board, which is pretty much all they ship with now. If you don't have a really old version of it, you should be fine. All you need to do is find the connector that fits the cable that comes off of the CR Touch. In my case, mine actually had some glue blocking the connector, some hot glue that was in there, so I had to go in with some pliers and remove that hot glue. Be careful when doing this though. Some people have grabbed the actual connector itself and not the hot glue and removed the connector, which means the board is essentially dead. And that's all there is with the install of this thing. We're ready to go ahead and button everything back up, manage the cables, and we have to update the firmware. Because the machine by default does not know how to auto bed level or do any of that stuff, we need to update it to do so. So you have to go to the Creality website that I'll have linked below and find the firmware that works for your machine. The one that I show in this recording actually didn't work for me. I had to find a different one because it just caused it to error out and not do auto home, which is a step that's coming up. So essentially, I had to go back in, find the right firmware, and get it to work properly. If this happens to you and it's not doing its auto home part, which we'll talk about in just a second, it's possible that there's a cable that you got disconnected when you were in your control box. So just make sure you double check that all of the wires are connected fully and you didn't bump any of them. Otherwise, it can cause problems for you. To install the firmware, you're going to need a freshly formatted SD card and place the bin file that was downloaded from the Creality website. This is going to be found inside the zip file that they give you. With the machine off, you're going to place the SD card into the machine and power it up. It will automatically install the firmware. It's going to be called flashing, and it'll take roughly 15 to 20 seconds or so for the machine to come back to life, and you might see a few new options inside of your menus now that we've updated the firmware. To start off with, you're going to go to Auto Home, and this is to get a measurement of how far your hot end is away from the build surface. The probe's not going to allow the nozzle to get all the way down to the build surface because it's designed to stop that from happening. When you get into the auto leveling, you're going to have to adjust your Z height. Move your Z height until a piece of paper has enough resistance to go under the nozzle. Also make sure you save your settings. I'm not going over this part in particular detail because my firmware is a little bit older of a version and this has changed in updated versions. But I'm just telling you, this is the one that worked for me, and this took me a long time to figure out how to get it to work properly, but this is all you really have to do. Also, make sure you save your settings, otherwise you're going to have to redo this every time you turn the machine back on. Once everything's saved and you have your Z height and everything's good, now you have to run your auto leveling option. This is going to go ahead and allow the probe to move around in 9 predetermined spots on your build plate. And all it's going to do is measure where the height is on that. This is going to basically create a mathematical model or approximate location of where the machine can guess that the build plate should be height-wise, so it can lay down an even layer of filament on your build plate. We're almost done, but we still have some work to do. I'm using Cura as my slicing software, and I have to go in and edit the machine settings to add some code to tell it to run the auto leveling. This is going to happen now every time I run a print. Doesn't matter if I'm running the same one or repeating one, anything it's going to do, it's going to go ahead and auto re-level every single time. I'm just doing this because I want to make sure that it works, and it only takes about a minute, so it's not a big deal to run it, and it's just another kind of insurance step to make sure you get a higher quality print. Alright, now we're ready to run a test print, and my first test print failed miserably, so I went back and played with the Z height a little bit, tested again, and had a successful run. The glass surface makes removing prints pretty easy. It can be a little frustrating at first, but it gets there, it's not too big of a deal, and the auto leveling adds a lot of confidence that the final outcome of the print is going to be successful. Now, I've had this printer running for a few days with its updated stuff, and for the most part, it's going well. I still have a few tweaks to make, but it's really fun. Overall, I probably spent about 3 hours tweaking, playing, and going through and figuring out things. One of the blessings and curses with a machine like this that's has so many options is that there's a lot of instructions online, but all those instructions are kind of specific to the person that did it. My machine overall was very vanilla. There was nothing special done with it. All I did was print some covers for it, but otherwise it's had nothing special done to it. And in this process, I've really been able to see all the different versions of the machine, what people have done to correct them, and now I'm able to go through and talk a little bit more confidently about how I can correct issues with my machine. So if you're into tinkering and liking to play with this stuff, hopefully my little tutorial or whatever this is here helped you out and will hopefully save you some time. But this is how I went through and made my Ender 3 that cost me $100 into a $175 Ender 3. I hope to see you next time.